Imagine climbing into an airplane knowing that one small mistake, one design flaw, or one unexpected change in the aircraft could mean there is almost no way back. Some airplanes became famous because they were revolutionary. Others became famous because pilots feared them. And a few became so dangerous that their accidents completely changed the future of aviation. These are 10 aircraft with some of the most disturbing safety histories ever recorded. And number 1 is an aircraft that became so infamous that it earned one of aviation's darkest nicknames. Let's start with number 10. The Tupolev Tu-104 was one of the Soviet Union's first successful jet airliners. When it entered service in the 1950s, it represented a huge technological step forward. But operating early jet technology came with serious problems. The Tu-104 was involved in numerous fatal accidents. In one of the worst, Aeroflot Flight 964 crashed near Moscow in 1973, killing all 122 people aboard. Other accidents involved problems ranging from loss of control and instrument failures to difficult handling conditions. The aircraft wasn't simply a bad airplane. It was an early jet operating during a period when pilots and engineers were still learning how high-speed passenger aircraft behaved. But its accident history made the Tu-104 one of the most dangerous early jetliners ever operated. At number 9 is the Ferry Battle. The battle was designed as a light bomber before World War II. But by the time the war began, aircraft technology had moved forward so quickly that the battle was badly outclassed. It was slower, lightly armed, and vulnerable against modern fighters. During the Battle of France, its crews were sent into combat against much more capable German aircraft. The result was devastating. The Australian War Memorial describes the Ferry Battle as having suffered the highest loss rate of any aircraft in RAF history during operations. The aircraft itself wasn't necessarily unstable. The real danger came from putting an outdated design into an environment where speed, armor, and defensive capability mattered enormously. Number 8 is the de Havilland DH.108 Swallow. This aircraft was not a normal passenger plane or fighter. It was an experimental aircraft designed to explore high-speed and swept-wing flight. Only 3 were built, and all 3 were eventually lost in fatal accidents. One broke apart during a high-speed dive at around Mach 0.9, killing test pilot Jeffrey de Havilland Jr. Another was destroyed in 1950, and the first prototype was also lost during testing. The DH.108 helped engineers understand the terrifying aerodynamic problems that could appear near the speed of sound. In other words, it was dangerous partly because it was exploring territory aviation had barely entered before. At number 7 comes the F-102 Delta Dagger. The F-102 was America's first operational supersonic interceptor capable of level flight at supersonic speed. But early in its career, the aircraft developed a troubling accident history. U.S. Air Force safety records documented repeated accidents during approaches, including aircraft descending below the glide path and striking trees, poles, fences, or approach structures. The problems weren't always caused by mechanical failures. Pilot workload, aircraft handling characteristics, and operational conditions all played roles. The F-102 eventually became a valuable interceptor, but its early history showed just how difficult the transition to supersonic aviation could be. Number 6 is the de Havilland Comet 1. And this one changed aviation forever. The Comet was revolutionary. It was the world's first pressurized civilian jet airliner. But in 1954, disaster struck. OH Flight 781 broke apart in midair near the island of Elba, killing all 35 people aboard. 3 months later, another comet suffered a catastrophic breakup near Naples, killing all 21 people aboard. Investigators eventually discovered the hidden problem: metal fatigue. The comet's square-shaped windows created areas of concentrated stress around their corners. Repeated pressurization cycles caused cracks to develop until the fuselage could suddenly fail. The entire Comet fleet was grounded. The tragedy forced engineers to rethink how pressurized aircraft structures were designed and tested. Modern rounded airplane windows are partly a legacy of lessons learned from this disaster. At number 5 is the Tupolev Tu-104's contemporary rival in the dangerous early jet era, the early generation high-speed military aircraft that pushed pilots and engineers to the edge. But now we move into aircraft that developed much darker reputations. Number 4 is the F-100 Super Sabre. The F-100 was America's first operational fighter capable of sustained supersonic flight in level flight. But early versions were difficult to fly. The aircraft's high-speed aerodynamics and handling characteristics demanded considerable skill, especially during takeoff and landing. The F-100 suffered a serious accident record during its service, and thousands of pilots operated it during an era when supersonic fighter technology was still rapidly evolving. It was incredibly fast for its time, but speed came with a price. And then we reached the aircraft that became one of the most controversial fighters in aviation history. Number 3. The Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. The Starfighter looked almost unreal. Its wings were incredibly thin. Its fuselage was long and narrow. It was designed around one simple idea: go extremely fast and climb extremely high. And it succeeded. But the same design philosophy that made the F-104 spectacular also made it demanding. In West German service, the aircraft became associated with an alarming number of crashes. According to Germany's Bundeswehr, F-104G crashes peaked at 26 in 1965, with 15 pilots killed that year alone. The aircraft eventually earned the infamous nickname Widowmaker. But there is an important part of the story that often gets ignored. The F-104 was not universally uncontrollable or inherently doomed. Different countries experienced very different accident histories, and many crashes involved operational conditions, weather, maintenance, training, or mission requirements. Still, its reputation was earned through a very real history of losses. And now, number 2. The B-24 Liberator. The B-24 was one of the most important bombers of World War II. It carried huge bomb loads, flew long distances, and was produced in enormous numbers. But the aircraft could be unforgiving. It had a high workload for its crews, demanding systems, and difficult emergency situations. Thousands of B-24s were lost during World War II, although many were destroyed by enemy action rather than simply crashing because of design flaws. So why include it? Because for the crews who flew these aircraft into combat, danger came from everywhere. Enemy fighters, anti-aircraft fire, engine failures, mechanical problems, weather, and the sheer difficulty of operating a large bomber in wartime. And finally, number 1. The most dangerous aircraft on this list isn't necessarily the aircraft with the highest number of crashes. It is the Havilland DH.108. Why? Because only 3 were built, and all 3 were lost in fatal accidents. Its pilots were deliberately exploring aerodynamic territory that was still poorly understood. At high speed, strange pitch oscillations and structural loads could become catastrophic within seconds. One aircraft broke apart during a high-speed dive. Another was lost during later testing, and the final prototype was also destroyed in a fatal accident. The DH.108 was essentially a flying laboratory, operating at the absolute edge of what engineers understood about high-speed flight. And that's the real lesson behind these aircraft. The most dangerous airplanes in history weren't always failures. Some were revolutionary. The Comet taught engineers how dangerous metal fatigue could be. The F-104 pushed fighter performance to extraordinary levels. The DH.108 helped reveal the aerodynamic problems of transonic flight. And aircraft like the Tu-104 showed the world just how challenging the transition into the jet age really was. Every accident left behind something valuable. A new rule, a stronger structure, a better test, a safer cockpit, or a completely different way of designing airplanes. Because aviation didn't become incredibly safe by avoiding every dangerous idea. It became safe by learning from the airplanes that came dangerously close to the edge.